KEF Connect. Conversations that matter. Tune in every week for interviews with industry trendsetters and community changemakers that will instill inspiration and ignite action. Visit www.kefholdings.com and click KEF Connect to listen.
Welcome to Season 6 of KEF Connect, a podcast by KEF Holdings, and this is truly a podcast that embraces so many stories, so many great topics, so many subjects, and amazing guests. I'm Nimi Mehta, and I'm very, very excited to be hosting Season 6. We are going to be discussing a great topic throughout Season 6, and that is the topic of wellness. This season, we're going to be diving in pretty deep, talking generally about the stereotypical understanding of wellness, but not just that, several other elements of it when it comes to physical well-being, mental, spiritual, alongside also how the wellness industry has become such a $1 trillion industry across the globe, especially after the last 18 months of the pandemic that we have had. So, I mean, by no means, I don't want to keep going on. I'd love to introduce our guests for episode 1 on the topic of the business of wellness. I would like to give a big hello and welcome to Yousef Al Gurg, who is the owner of Gravitydxb. Maria Leonard, is it Maria? You're a spiritual coach and the founder of Life Scripting, and Kirsty Heaten, who is a certified mindfulness teacher, an ICF Coach, sound and Reiki Therapist as well. All of you, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I gave a general and a little brief introduction of who you all are, but I know there is so much more to it. So I'd love to start with you, Kirsty. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So my name is Kirsty. I've lived here in the UAE, 30 plus years, so coming up for almost 39 years now, originally from the UK. I teach mindfulness. It is my passion, actually. I've been a mindfulness teacher for many years, been practicing mindfulness for almost a decade now. I came to it when I was actually really struggling and quite unwell, and found it really helped and gave me a grounding and a foundation. So I'm enjoying sharing that with our community through the events we do with Mindful Me, which I'm a part of. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Yousef, on to you. Thank you once again for being here. And could you please tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do here in the UAE?
Okay, I'm Yousef, born and raised in the UAE. By academics, I'm an architect, but I've never really practiced that. I've touched onto a lot of different fields. I mean, all of them have had some fitness element into it. So I started off as a football player back from when I was in high school, did that all the way through, halfway through university, then I got occupied with my studies. From there, I went a bit more into mountaineering, did a few different mountains around the UAE and a few international as well. And then from there, I came across the sport of calisthenics. So if you're not aware, calisthenics is basically training using just your body weight. So it's a lot of handstand and stuff like that, and balancing and stuff like that. From there, I started off Gravity Calisthenics Gym, which is the first calisthenics and parkour gym in the region, and then I'm still managing that. And then I've also recently joined the Department of Tourism, working specifically on the Expo project as well.
Amazing. Busy guy, our Yousef. On to Maria. Maria, please, over to you. What do you do and what do you bring here into the UAE?
Well, I've been in the UAE for the last 7 years, but when I was a child, I actually grew up here. So I've been around the Middle East a lot. I'm originally Armenian, and I come from the background of teaching. I've been teaching English as a second language since 2004. But I've always been into spirituality, energy work, breath work, because both my parents were into it. And finally, I embraced the calling, let's say, and I started working in that domain in 2011. And currently, I work at Illuminations. I give breathwork sessions, energetic work. So basically, life scripting is the modality of all my years of research and understanding how to help heal the mind and the body and understand it from an energetic perspective as well as spiritual perspective. And I train that. I've been training for the past 2 years about more than 150 people because I love teaching other than sitting and counseling and coaching or healing others. I love teaching.
This is so amazing because the scope of all three of you being around this table is amazing, because not only are we focusing on mental wellness here, spiritual, physical as well. It's so beautiful to be here around this table having this conversation. So this is going to be probably, I think, the biggest question of the episode, because there is so much to this and we could probably go on for hours about it. But the word wellness, there is so many elements attached to this word. You all know this, not personally only, but professionally also. So I would like to just get all of your definitions. What do you think wellness is, and what does it mean to you? Let's start off with Kirsty.
It's a really interesting question, and when you sent the brief across, I was having a really good think about this, because there is so many layers to it, and I think it's so individual for each and every person. Again, going back to mindfulness practice, for me it starts with awareness. So it starts really on that inner journey of what wellness feels for us inside. I meet lots of people, and again, the way I started off with mindfulness practice was I physically was unwell. So I'm really aware of all the different aspects that bring a sense of wellness together, and we may not be able to do some of them, and other parts that we will use more. But I think it is so multi-layered, and we'd have to ask people individually, what does wellness mean for them? What is it? I hear lots of people say, wellness for me means being out in nature, which for me is a huge thing, like spending time outside, definitely having an awareness of my emotions, my feelings, physical activity, so many different layers to it.
Wow, well, thank you so much for that. I know that was a hard question to summarize very, very quickly. But Yousef, to you, what is wellness?
I mean, it's pretty hard to actually up what Kirsty just said. That was a very good description. But yeah, it is a very wide topic to talk about. I mean, but for me, wellness is basically, like you said, it starts off with awareness and basically understanding what you need to do to be able to not only perform both physically and mentally, but also to be able to push your boundaries or achieve more than what you normally would be able to achieve in normal circumstances. And that starts with first understanding where you currently are. A lot of the time, in terms of wellness terms, basically, we might not be well, but we won't be aware of that until you actually do something to change. Then you can then understand that where I was not basically my optimal phase, basically. I can actually go beyond that. And for me, I mean, wellness is always tied, I mean, everyone has a different method to find wellness. For me, it usually does have a physical element as well. So I usually put it back to, I mean, one thing that I really discovered wellness was actually when I went on one of my hikes in Argentina. It was a 21-day hike over there. And it was just 10 hours every day of just, you had your backpack on, and just walking step after step, and it was a sort of meditation, basically, to allow me to really clear my head, understand what really matters and what really doesn't matter, and focus on what I actually really want to do.
Wow. And you know what's so interesting about that is you may not discover it overnight what your method or what your way of wellness is. It could take so much time, but once you get it, it's just the most euphoric feeling. Maria, to you, wellness, what does it mean to you, and what does it mean in your life?
Well, it is difficult now to top them up, but it is definitely a personal experience. It has to do with what stage you are at life and what phase you're going through, and definitely not following somebody else's definition or method per se. For example, for years I was very much into energy work and trying to heal my mind and body only through energy work, which I neglected my nutritional values that I have or my physical well-being. And I now know that for me it's all about having it holistically. And at different stages or at different points in your life, meeting different wellness experts and combining them all together and having a nice, let's say, personalized way of living your life that makes you actually feel fulfilled. For me, fulfillment is the key, I guess.
I love that, fulfillment. One thing that's very interesting is that when you look at the topic of wellness over the generations, I want to say it's shifted, yet at the same time, when you actually look back, you're talking tribal days, you're talking holistic methods. It is actually the root of so many things that we now live and breathe by to this day. However, it seems like it got lost amongst some generations previous to us. Maybe wellness, like we said, meant something different to them completely. Wellness could have just been survival for so many of the previous generations. But now, where do you think the shift has happened? Because so many people now, young millennials as well, so focused on wellness, mindfulness, everything that's involved with that. Where do you think that conversation kind of shifted over time, Kirsty?
Well, not disputing the fact that we're still in COVID and passing through that, which I think has had a huge effect on people really coming back and noticing, okay, this has forced us to slow down in many ways, forced us to kind of be more aware of this is our health and it's important. And it's really true. It's again an interesting question, because wellness has always been there through the generations. I'm married to an Emirati, and my husband's family were actually medicine doctors. So when we go back, we know that there were so many holistic traditions that they followed and used. All of our cultures have that. I do think the world just got very busy. It's very fast-paced, it's very busy. Again, it's an individual thing where some tribes and people will have kept going with those traditions and others will have got lost along the way. But I think it's so encouraging to see what's happening now, and this kind of influx of people coming back and saying, yes, we want this, and we want our wellness to be maybe more holistic or more movement or more ideas and open to more ideas. And I think also the sharing of our traditions as well is coming out. So it's beautiful to hear. I hear people talk about shamanic work, and it's fascinating. All the way over in another part of the world, we can connect and know about these ways.
I think you're so right about that. Yousef, where do you think this shifted? Kirsty kind of touched on the topic of the pandemic and how that's truly made people stop and think about everything in their lives from every perspective. But over the generations, any personal experience for you that has kind of seen that shift, or has it always been within your blood, so to say?
Basically for me, I think you mentioned one point, which is basically historically and basically what people in the past, wellness might be basically just survival for them. So that's one aspect which I believe is basically the awareness of wellness. So back then people might have been too preoccupied by their basic needs, basically, so they would not really necessarily be aware of their current mental or physical state, and just be more focused on basically getting through the day. So I think now, and then the other aspect that you mentioned as well is also being really busy and the way we are right now. So that's another aspect that basically right, in the past, with the way they used to live, wellness used to come as a normal part of life. Right now, we kind of have to step out of our everyday life to find a way to maintain ourselves or make sure that we're actually feeling well. And that's one thing that I also struggle with at times. With work, stress builds up, your workload builds up, and you do not really necessarily notice that you're actually spiraling down. You need to sometimes just take a step away and actually realize, oh, you know what, I'm not actually where I was a few months ago, and you need to restart over there. So I think the awareness does play a role in that, where people are actually being more aware of what wellness actually means, and then also the current lifestyle of it right now does push people to have to step out of their normal routines to actually make sure they feel well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And Maria, especially with what you do, you, like you said, you meet so many people, so many different experiences. Do you see that shift in people's awareness of wellness, and why has that occurred?
Yeah, if I just rewind back 7 years back in Dubai and all the wellness centers that existed, and now it's becoming a trend and people are aware of it. If I sit and have a conversation, I can say I'm a spiritual coach, and they won't say, like, what is that? Compared to years ago where I had to just say, well, I'm just a teacher. I think the internet has played a role over the years. It has made people question, find more information. Yes, there is an overload of information, sometimes even false information, but that has made people realize and prioritize what is necessary in life, because maybe in the past it was more about, like, as they both mentioned, about survival and work and just living life, and now realizing, no, that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
There is much more to that, and much more to understand about life, and all these questions that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I believe.
Yeah, I mean, let's just go back to that survival point of the previous generations. Is wellness then, in those terms, is wellness a privilege? Is focusing on your wellness an absolute privilege, that you are in a point in your life, you are in a certain location in the world, you are of a certain standing in society that allows you to turn around and actually, you know what, I can stop everything and actually just look after myself for a bit. Is that something you believe, Kirsty?
Well, I think that's another interesting question that has a yes and a no answer.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely for some aspects of it, yes. It is a luxury. Other aspects I want to say no, because it should be for everyone. Mm-hmm. And it can be for everyone. Yes, different aspects of, depending on where you go for, if you have a retreat or the special classes that you do and things like that, yes, it can become a very expensive lifestyle. But actually, again, I focus going back onto the inner work. This is something we can give ourselves for free. It has no cost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what do you think, Yousef? I mean, you were born and raised here in the UAE. Of course, as Maria mentioned, a massive shift here in this region when it comes to the wellness aspect of things. But when it comes to wellness, is it a luxury here, or is it something that, because of the lifestyle here in the UAE, the weather, the working hours, whatever it may be, do you think that it's a luxury in itself?
I mean, I think we're all very lucky to be able to live over here in Dubai, where we live. I mean, if you're comparing to somewhere else, we live a relatively very comfortable lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, yes, I do believe at certain points it does become a bit of a luxury where, I mean, you do have, I mean, if you're looking at other countries or even with people living here in Dubai, sometimes you just get caught up. Your plate gets filled up and you don't really have the time to be able to stop and be like, oh, I need to look after myself. The moment you take some time off, it's just like, then things will start piling up on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So it does at times seem like somewhat of a luxury, but then it's also very accessible for everyone. I mean, you can achieve wellness through so many different ways. I mean, if you're looking at it from the monetary side, it definitely does not have to be something that would be a luxurious product basically for you. But I would say it's a luxury mainly in terms of time and being able to allocate the time to make sure you can take care of yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that that's so important, right? And that's why you mentioned it earlier, Maria, the social media aspect, the internet being such, I mean, especially during the pandemic, by the way, when we were all locked up in our homes and, maybe we weren't able to go see our therapist. We weren't able to go to that class that we love to go to every single day to help us release. There's so many different things that stopped for us that we were so used to. Did you find that? How did your aspect of business change? I mean, you were so used to being face to face with people and, helping them in those ways. How did that shift, and was that a pro or a con when it came to what you do?
Well, here's a little secret. Back in 2019, I was hoping that we would do things online, because I was doing a lot of courses, attending a lot of webinars in the US through Zoom. And then I was hoping that I could reach a bigger audience. And since working, let's say, at Illuminations, there is a certain capacity. And when that happened in March last year, I was talking to Sonia, who is the founder of Illuminations, and she was like, what are we going to do? I said, Zoom, and let's just work with that. So I remember very well, we went in, we started uploading and downloading the app, etc. So personally, it was a good time for me, because I was able to grab people's attention through social media, help them realize that you don't really need to go into a room, sit with someone face to face to express yourself or heal yourself and transform yourself. And I think that made people realize. Many of them were assuming that after 3-4 months, people will go back to wanting to see, let's say, a therapist face to face or wanting to do a retreat. But I still have many people choosing the online way of healing or the online way of learning more about themselves. So there is really an advantage to what has happened, and has helped many people feel more connected, especially in different parts of the world that they are still in lockdown. and they wanted to interact and connect with other people. So
I mean, if anything, it adds a layer of convenience
Yes.
for a lot of people in their lives. Yousef, I mean, when the pandemic hit, how did that kind of change the way you do things? When it comes to a professional business side, of course, you got Gravitydxb. That's a very hands-on gym, pun intended. And how did that change with the last 18 months?
I mean, when the pandemic first hit, it was a bit difficult, since especially the fitness industry, we were one of the first ones to close down, and we were one of the last ones to actually open up after that.
Yeah.
So we did take a very heavy hit, basically, and it was hard on both me and my partner Saleh as owners, as well as our trainers as well. I mean, the majority of our trainers have come from abroad, and they're here on their own. So them being locked out in their apartments on their own was a bit difficult for them.
Yeah.
For our members, it was difficult for them. What we tried to do is keep them engaged, again, through Zoom, through different platforms. We were very active on social media, keeping active with them. We tried to keep, just to try and keep everyone sane, we did also some small community events online, basically. So we'd have basically monthly Zoom meetings and stuff like this, where we'd meet with the whole community, have all the trainers come together, the members engage. And then, for me personally, I actually like the quarantine. It gave me I'm usually out and about quite a bit, so that gave me a very good opportunity to connect with my family as well. So I'd spend the whole day at home with my parents, stuff. It was a pretty nice phase where we could actually connect, but it was also difficult not being out there, and I'm used to constantly being around and stuff. My workouts had to shift indoor as well and stuff like that. So it was an interesting time, but a difficult time, but also I think there was a lot of learnings that came out of it as well.
Absolutely. On a personal level, I thought it was beautiful, the depths in which we came to understand ourselves, really. Professionally, of course, very difficult for a lot of people and a lot of industries. Kirsty, over to you. When it comes to what you do, do you think that the pandemic, actually, we've said this, but furthermore, kind of, it was as tough as it was mentally for a lot of people, spiritually, physically, of course, it actually forced them to look within. And for you and what you do, how did that expand your scope in any way of your teachings and how you help the people around you?
Yeah, it was a very interesting time, because as it hit and everything went into lockdown, we were really in the middle of doing all our workshops that we run. So 4 nights a week we have workshops. They were full, we had people there, and all of a sudden we need to reorientate and see. So we did exactly the same. We moved on to Zoom. It took a little adapting, because our work is very much with people, and I still feel there's a different connection that way. But I am so grateful for Zoom, because we have people joining from Miami. We have a lovely, many of our community who've actually left Dubai over the last few years were getting in touch and saying, we've seen that we could join mindfulness or meditation workshops. They're online and they're in the south of Peru, which was amazing.
Wow.
So we got to do that part, and connecting with people in a time where a lot of people struggled emotionally. A lot of people were very lonely, very scared, away from family, as you were saying, Yousef. So that ability to be able to support people that way. We also had sessions that were much shorter, so 30 minutes. So people could literally, when they couldn't commit to an hour and a half, say, okay, 30 minutes I can check in. We can be with, supporting somebody during that time. It made it much more accessible. So we are now back in person and kind of missing those times. So now looking at how do we integrate both. So yeah.
And I love that. There is this beautiful side to this pandemic, which not a lot of people will agree with me about, but like I said, industries have just evolved into ways that no one imagined that they would. There is a particular thing, I'm not sure about the three of you, where many conversations surrounding wellness, personally for me, is incredibly important. I surround myself with people who believe the same things I believe when it comes to that topic, but there are a lot of cynical people out there when it comes to just even the word wellness. And that is because they believe that there are a lot of people in this industry who have kind of jumped on the wellness bandwagon, not truly living the wellness authenticity. So I'll go back to you first, Kirsty. Is that something that you believe in? Is that something you've come across? And how can we identify That is a tough question, I know. But how are we able to identify as a regular, say just a regular normal person who actually wants to now dive into wellness? How can I identify who's real and who's not, and who's truly living that?
I think that, very honestly, is a very difficult question to answer. I can speak for myself and what our values are at Mindful Me, that it's always about connection, communication, making those that authentic connection with people who come to get support or to join workshops. I think social media has allowed us to be more connected, and for people to have access to things that they would never have access to before, information, learning, all of these platforms, which is wonderful. I would say very much it's trial and error. You want to go and see if you connect with that person. How do you feel? See if you connect in that space, that environment, and knowing yourself. So again, knowing how you feel within yourself, to be with other people, to be in a setting, give it a try. Have a look at what kind of training people have done, just to be aware of the knowledge they're sharing. But really, it comes down to that authentic connection, and that, for me, is so, so important.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think when you know as well.
Yes.
It's a gut feeling a lot of the time. Yousef, when it comes to the physical wellness of things, I personally have experienced a lot of places here in the UAE and Dubai where I go along and I've been sold this dream of, they truly are living and breathing what they say they are. And you get there and there's literally just a sign that says, live, love, life, and you're kind of like, well, you're not really doing what it says on the tin. Like, you couldn't feel it when you're in there. So for you, how important is it to create that space? And how have you created a space for people to walk in and where they instantly feel that?
I get what you mean in terms of, wellness or is a word that's thrown around very easily nowadays. And what might work for one person might not work for the other. So I don't think there's a clear answer to that in terms of one solution, but it's basically a trial and error. It's the same thing when it comes to gravity. It would work. We do have people who come in there who would love it from the first day, and then we have people who would walk in and then it's like, this is not for me. So there's no one solution that would suit everyone, and it's based on their personal preference, basically. But then I do find there's a lot of elements that do play into that go beyond the actual product you're buying. So if you're looking at physical fitness, a lot of people will be coming there for the training, but then there are a lot of other elements that would play into the wellness element in that might be more important sometimes for physical training. So than physical training. So we get a lot of people that come in there that tell us that I've never been able to commit to a gym more than a couple of months. But they'd come in where they'd find a community, they'd make friends, and that's what we see with a lot of our members. They come in there, they spend 2-3 hours over there, only 1 hour of that is training. The rest is just talking with other people, trying out new things, and it just creates this sense of a community, which I find a lot of times would be the main driving force to allow you to actually build some continuity over there. So again, it might not be the exact answer you're looking for, but you might find some other elements to play into that might help you find the perfect mixture that you're looking for, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, this is an incredibly lucrative business and industry. We're not here to sugarcoat that whatsoever. And, some people do believe that, if you're there to truly help people, why are you charging for it? Well, because my time, everything that you've learned over the years. You said you've been here for 7 years, right, Maria? You've truly built this network of people who trust you. That comes with a lot of energy of your own to create that. And do you believe that there is this kind of stream of people who are being a bit inauthentic when it comes to the wellness industry?
Absolutely. I've experienced many of that. I still experience it to this day when I have some clients who would come in, let's say, a bit traumatized from what they've gone through. I think it would, I always use this keyword that I really love, discernment. Having to know the discernment of what is right for you and what isn't. And yes, sometimes you do know if the person is authentic or not, but eventually it's about the conversation that when you have with that person, the therapist, the healer, the counselor, the coach, are they taking your power away or are they actually giving you your power back?
Mm-hmm.
If you experience someone who's going through a difficult experience and you tell them, I definitely need to give you 5 to 10 sessions, otherwise it won't work, then that for me is already like a no-no.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about number of sessions. It's not about how many times you see a person. It's about how much you can trust them and how much you're ready to actually change and transform yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the very first things that I always say in my free consultations, because they usually ask me that. So how many sessions so I can know how much I need to pay? And it's like, no, just come for one and see how you feel about it. And then I have my YouTube channel, I have my Instagram posts. You can go and learn a little bit from there, read some books as well, and every now and then just join the community. Don't feel attached to the wellness facilitators, because that's how you're giving your power away.
And that wellness journey, the way it begins is incredibly important. I actually think that's the most important part of the journey. The people you come across, the people you speak to, the people you seek advice from. And let's actually talk about that, because, you know, for all of us who actually do try to implement a lot of these values of wellness in our lives. There are a lot of people out there potentially listening to the podcast right now who've just stumbled across this and they're like, oh, wellness, what's this about? So how do you start your wellness journey? It may sound, and again, there's no black or white, there's no 1, 2, 3, there's no right or wrong. Maybe you could actually even share your own personal stories of, I know, Kirsty, you said it was a physical unwellness for you that kind of triggered everything and caused you to really deep dive into oneself. But could you share with us how you started your wellness journey?
So I feel that I've always been on kind of a spiritual journey. That's been happening for a very, very long time. I actually was very unwell. So for my story, everything kind of came at once. It was interesting. Everything kind of happened at once. So I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, which went undiagnosed for a long time. As a result of that, I had very severe anxiety. So anxiety to the point of I had panic attacks frequently. I had young children at the time, found it very difficult to be a mum. And I realized that really it was, I needed help. I needed to find some help. So I did. I reached out and got the help I needed, and it was life-changing for me because the person who I reached out to, I felt very safe with. There was that lovely element of trust, and she kind of introduced me. She's been a mindfulness teacher for 50 years, so she introduced me to mindfulness and meditation, and it's really gone on from there and really opened my eyes to so many different modalities of healing and wellness and what that means. And I'll be very honest, I've had some really not very nice experiences, and maybe not also trusting myself at that time, because in that moment you're very vulnerable, or that was my experience. I was very vulnerable. And if you'd have said to me, you know, in a weekend I can make you feel 80% better, I was in and I pay the money, because I wanted to be well. I was well before, and all of a sudden I wasn't as well as I could be, and my body was really sort of alienated myself from my body. So I wanted to reconnect. I wanted to be a mum. You know, I wanted to be able to do what I'd always done. So it was such a difficult time, and it happened over a period of years, but I wouldn't change it for the world now when I look back, because it has opened up different opportunities for me, but also for me to be able to share that with other people. I think we all start in so many different ways. It doesn't matter how, you know, I say the same to clients, why you come isn't the main thing. It's looking at that, wanting for connection, knowing sometimes I need or want something different, and just not being aware of what it is. And yes, I never say I'm here to heal or do any of that for somebody. I'm really here to facilitate them to see what's already inside.
It's just starting that counts, right?
It's the starting, and honestly that can be the hardest part. It took me a long time to actually initially go and get the help. I did sit outside the office quite a few times, and oh no, I won't. I'm fine. I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
Yeah, and that's interesting as well, because not just mentally or spiritually, but physically as well, Yousef. For people to really get up and go is I personally find it incredibly difficult. I know I need to, I know I should, but for me, it's just, I'd rather just sit there and just bathe in my own self-pity, to be honest, most of the time. But I mean, for you mentioned before, you're an architect, right? And then you had your bout in football, in college, or whatever it may be. So how did your wellness journey, I mean, what it sounds like it was always really within you, but for you, was it different being a man to be going into the wellness industry? Because when I look at the wellness industry, there is this stereotype that it's generally more women, and women are more emotionally driven, and I do not agree with that stereotype whatsoever. I'd like to say that I think that men 100% are just as emotional. But for you, Yousef, when it comes to being a male in the wellness industry, was that something that you thought was different when you first joined?
I mean, personally, I think whether it's coming from a male point of view or female point of view, I don't think there is an actual start of when people actually go into wellness. I think it's something that we're always involved in, though we do have spikes and it goes up and goes down, and we look at our transitional phases from one type of wellness to another, basically. So I mean, you might find some phase where people will be looking for wellness within, and then next phase you will be looking at it from an external source, basically. So. And what might work for you at one point of life might not work for the other. So I think we're constantly on that journey, and regardless of who it is, they might have different methods in which they're looking to obtain their own wellness. And it's just about finding what works for you at that time. And a few years later, that might not work for you. You might look for something different. I mean, and as an example currently what I find one thing that does work for me, which it's a bit ironic, but at that time I do find, if I'm not working, if I'm not keeping myself busy, I actually feel like I'm not feeling well, actually. So I think while working at some points of time, I actually degrade your mental wellness, but then in other times it actually might enhance that. So it's just about finding basically what works for you at that point of time, and just pursuing that. That's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And Maria, for you, I mean, the amount of people that you've probably seen over the last 7 years here in this region, coming in for many different reasons, many different walks of life, many different backgrounds as well. Wellness journeys, where they start them, there is no right recipe to this. What are the particular patterns that you've seen on people that are starting their wellness journeys?
I think the most common one is anxiety. And obviously stress from work. For most of us, we're expats, so living in, you're not with your family, you're not with your closest friends, and you're trying to build a community around you. This can cause a lot of loneliness. That's another very key aspect, that people start to realize they don't have anyone that they can trust to pour their heart out. And that builds up and causes, let's say, anxiety or panic attacks, etc. And they want to trust someone, they want to have a confidant, and they come to therapy to heal that. Of course, it would be better if people don't suffer and go into wellness. They actually go out of curiosity, of understanding life in general. And I think if that is also gradually implemented in our education system, then children would know that, it is normal for us to meditate daily, to be aware of our breath, to be aware of our surrounding, to be aware of our thoughts, rather than reaching to a level of despair and then trying to find out who am I going to trust and who is actually going to help me out of this rut, let's say. So. But people are becoming more aware. There are many more events at the moment, as we can see. So people are now starting to be more curious. Like, so you're going for a yoga class. Let me see what that is like. Or you're attending a meditation. Let me see what that is like. And I think that would really help with people not reaching into that state of despair and finding their path early on.
And I think that's so good as well, to also just reach out of your comfort zone in many things. I mean, there's so many times I've been scrolling through social media and seen certain things that I personally would not follow or particularly go out and do, but just seeing it, I would send it to a friend and be like, what do you think, shall we? And it's just that curiosity as well to, will I like it? I might, potentially not, but at least I've tried and I know. This has been such a fantastic conversation, and I think one way to kind of wrap it up and get your thoughts on this is the future of wellness, whether it be in this region, whether it be globally, whether it be on the online portal that we call social media. What are your thoughts on it, and and how hopeful are you for the future of wellness?
Well, as a mindfulness teacher, I want to tell you I'm only ever quite here in the moment. So for the future, I'm very hopeful. I'm really hopeful. I do a lot of corporate mindfulness and mindfulness in schools as well. And I see a much more interest and curiosity to bring these aspects into school and to make it more a normality, and not just in school but in our homes, to make this really, the parts of COVID that kept us isolated or kept us at home, to be able to use those opportunities and take them with us, that connecting to family, having a greater sense of our emotional well-being. I think it's a good step forward. I see what's happening nowadays, and if it's anything to go by, I feel comforted by the fact, yes, but I don't tend to travel too far forward.
No, I think that's probably best. Yousef, for you, I mean, in the physical realm of things, do you see exactly what Kirsty said, actually, which is quite interesting, is, of course, the children are our future. And do you see a lot more interest from the younger generation coming to get physical and focusing more on their physical well-being? And how positive do you think that is for the future?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, if we're to look, just look back 10, 15 years, the physical industry was not what it was over here. So not only in terms of the numbers, but even in terms of the diversity. I mean, back then you'd have a few sports that people would do. People right now are not afraid of stepping out of the basically mainstream sports. So you'd have, like for example, I started up with calisthenics. I've seen people that have been doing fencing, been doing wake surfing. So just so many different sports are coming out, and people are not afraid of embracing new sports and just taking that forward. And I think Dubai as a city, basically we have a huge offering over here, and people are, we're very lucky to be able to try out whatever we want over here, and unfortunately that's not the case all over the world, but I do think more and more we'll see people going into areas that are more of interest of them and being happy to embrace that, basically.
Absolutely. And Maria, lastly with you, what are you hopeful for with the conversation of wellness? How would you like to see that conversation around it change within society?
Well, like she said about having it at home, having parents and children comfortably expressing themselves, parents being aware that if a child needs more awareness and understanding, to help them out, finding an expert for it, and as well parents themselves understanding and becoming more aware. And I do believe that it is getting better and better. At least that's how I see my reality, so it does reflect on the future situation of where we're headed. So starting from home, starting within ourselves, and people having this not to be a taboo anymore, finding it that this is a normality, as we all mentioned.
Well, like I said, thank you all so much for being here for this conversation. Those were the quickest 45 minutes of my life. We could go on for hours, but it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. How can people find you? How can they reach out to you, Kirsty?
Yes, so we're very active on social media, so on Facebook or on Instagram, mindfulme_Dubai. Yes, we're there. Come and join some of our events.
Amazing. Reach out. And Yousef, yourself?
Yeah, same. We're mainly active on Instagram. You can find us on Gravitydxb, or make sure to pass by at any point as well. Our doors are open.
Amazing. Where are you located?
In Al Quoz.
Al Quoz. Amazing. Maria, yourself, how can people reach out to you?
Again, on social media, I am Maria Leonard, and you'll see me at Illuminations in JLT most of the time.
Amazing. That's the place to be then. Thank you all so much once again. To listen to more episodes of KEF Connect, visit kefholdings.com and go to the KEF Connect page. We are also available on various streaming platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, the Podbean podcast app, and more. Thank you all once again, and I wish you a wonderful day.